Police Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're looking at voting around the country. Yes, early voting. Millions of people are doing it. Harvey Wasserman with us, senior editor at the Ohio-based freepress.org. His book, How the GOP Stole America's 2004 Election and Is Rigging 2008, among 4 books he's written on voting. Brad Friedman with us, independent journalist with Brad Blog at bradblog.com. He's reported extensively on issues of vote rigging. Talk about Sequoia and Colorado. Welcome, Brad, to the video stream.
Thank you, Amy. Great to be here. Sequoia is one of the big 4 voting machine companies. Of course, they have failed in state after state. Their most recent failure here, and it's hard to keep up with them when it comes to Sequoia, is the 11,000 ballots that they were, absentee ballots, that they were supposed to print out and send. They didn't. They lied about it. And hopefully, once they got caught, now they'll hopefully be sending them out this week, and hopefully voters will be getting them. But to me, by far, the greater concern is these electronic touchscreen machines all over the country, which are beginning to fail in state after state. And officials are claiming it's a recalibration issue. If they recalibrate the screen, that will take care of it. And I gotta say that advising anyone to touch these machines, to insert memory cartridges in them, which is needed for recalibration, while they're programmed, is absolutely insane. And the fact that the Democratic Party is doing little or nothing and allowing these machines to continue to be used instead of pulling them and requiring folks to vote on paper ballots is to their shame, and it's somewhat maddening at this point, this many years into this, knowing what we know about these systems.
Tell us more about vote flipping and touch screens in West Virginia. What's happening there with early voting?
Sure, and it's West Virginia, it's Tennessee, it's Texas, Missouri, Nevada. Generally, what seems to happen here is people go in and vote for a Democratic straight party ticket or for Barack Obama, and the vote flips to a Republican or some other candidate. We've got video of that at bradblog.com that folks can take a look at, see it for themselves. And we've actually got an election official showing a machine with one of these problems, showing, suggesting that it's a calibration, a screen calibration issue, showing how when you vote for one candidate, it flips to another. And then he says, look, here we're recalibrating it now, so it will now work fine. And we actually see that it still doesn't work fine, even after he's recalibrated it. He tries to make a straight party vote, and it ends up selecting Ralph Nader for president. These machines need to be pulled out because even when they work, the problem is that there is absolutely no way to ever verify that any vote ever cast on a touchscreen machine like this has been recorded as per the voter's intent. It's strictly impossible, even with the so-called paper trail, and that Democrats aren't raising holy hell about it is maddening, frustrating, and frankly, to their shame at this point, knowing what we know.
Brad, let's turn to some of the problems that have been reported with the electronic voting machines. As you were pointing out, Virginia Matheny from Jackson County, West Virginia, was one of the first people to report a problem with vote flipping last week after an attempt to vote Democrat was flipped to Republican. Videothevote.org spoke to Virginia Matheny about her experience.
When I pressed to enter my vote for the Democrat, the check mark jumped to the one above, to the Republican. Well, I pressed the Democrat again, and it jumped up again. So I asked a poll worker, I said, well, why will this machine not allow me to vote for my candidate? She said, well, it's got a sensitive screen. She said, you're touching it too hard. She said, just barely use the tip of your fingernail to touch it, which I did. Then I went to the next candidate. Well, it did the same thing. I voted for the Democrat. It jumped up to the Republican. Well, then she told me, she said, just keep pressing the one that you want to vote for and it will finally take. Well, I did, and it did stay there. But I proceeded to have problems all through the ballot. After I had the problem voting, I filed a formal complaint with the Secretary of State's office, and her deputy investigator called me to ask me what happened. I told him. He said, well, it sounded like the machines need to be recalibrated, that when they're moved, sometimes it messes them up.
Video the Vote also spoke to Jackson County, West Virginia County Clerk Jeff Waybright about the vote flips on the iVotronic machines.
If the poll worker got to a machine and it was out of calibration, this is what would happen. I'm going to touch Barack Obama there, but notice it jumped clear down to Chuck Baldwin because the machine is out of calibration. Now it sent me to a screen to vote a write-in ballot. When I hit Barack Obama, the machine's out of calibration. It did not jump up to the Republican candidate. It did not vote a straight Republican ticket. It didn't do that. It jumped down to Chuck Baldwin.
Let me ask you, Brad Friedman of Brad Blog, what should people do? I mean, we heard from Virginia in West Virginia, and she did file a complaint. How do you know when it takes or if it hasn't taken? And this whole issue of receipt for voting, like we get when you get money from an ATM, is there a receipt anywhere in the country?
Well, and that tape, by the way, of West Virginia, of Waybright, as that tape continues, he shows what happens after they recalibrate the system and the problems still occur. So to recalibrate in the middle of an election is insane. That's the most vulnerable point for these systems, where you can insert malicious software and anything else. As to receipts, no, you don't get them. You shouldn't get them, because the fact is we don't want people leaving the polls and being able to buy and sell, their vote. That's why it's so important to have transparency, to get it right in the first place. And any so-called receipt should be a paper ballot, hand-marked, that we all can go in, every citizen in the country can go in and take a look at after the election and assure that it was, in fact, counted correctly as per the voter's intent. That is strictly impossible with any direct recording electronic. These are usually touchscreen voting machines. It is strictly impossible, no matter what it says on the screen, to know in fact that that vote was counted as per the voter's intent. That's why these machines are so damn dangerous. And I was on the air last week in Reno, Nevada, with Harry Reid, who actually came on the air and said, well, we're lucky here in Nevada because we have a paper trail for all of our votes. Fact is, in Reno, Nevada, they use illegally certified touchscreen machines, yes, with a paper trail, but 100% unverifiable as far as whether they're recording the voter's intent. So you got to fight for a paper ballot. You got to ask for one where you're allowed to have one. And yes, please bring a video camera, videotape your vote, put it out there on the web, videothevote.org, and up on YouTube. This time we've got to make a lot of noise about what happens. I promise you, if this happens to Republicans, they'll be making noise. I'm disappointed that the Democratic Party and Barack Obama is not making the noise that they should be and demanding that these machines be removed and voters given paper ballots.
Brad Friedman, in the case of this West Virginia voter, the woman who described what happened, she's sitting there with the poll worker showing her what's happening. So, I mean, this ends privacy in voting. You've got to bring in the poll worker and show them who you're trying to vote for?
Yeah, that's unfortunately, that's what has to happen, because if you don't, A, they can't help you with these machines. They're very complicated to use, and B, nobody's going to believe you that this problem occurred in the first place. They probably won't believe you even if you do have a poll worker over there. That's why we're suggesting people bring their cell phone, their cell phone video cameras, and videotape this experience that they have when the vote jumps from one candidate to another. But yeah, these are the hoops that we've been forced to jump through in order to try to cast our vote, to try and get it counted, and to try and get it counted accurately. And after all of these years of, folks like Harvey and myself running around with our hair on fire trying to warn people about this, it's disappointing, to say the least, to see this going on now in state after state after state. It's not just West Virginia. I promise you that. Again, Brad of Brad Blog is joining us by video stream from California. This issue of the emergency declared by Governor Christ in Florida and allowing the lines, allowing the polling places to be extended to 12 hours. Brad, can you talk about these extremely long lines in Florida for early voting? Yeah, I can. And frankly, this is to Governor Charlie Crist, a Republican. It's to his effort, especially in the midst of this all-out Republican war on democracy, that we're seeing all across the country. So I'm going to give Governor Chris credit there for trying to ease the lines. In fact, the Republican legislature had shortened the early voting hours some time ago. And they're seeing all kinds of problems, all kinds of lines. The bottlenecks, unfortunately, are tending to be at the registration check-in process. Once again, these computers that are used to check people in to register to vote, that seems to be the bottleneck because, in fact, the state of Florida has moved to paper ballots. And I've seen some of these election registrars, supervisors of election down there in Florida, ordering more optical scan machines into the polling places when that's not the holdup. The op scan process is done at the end of voting. The holdup is checking people in.